I'm going to list the worst thing that every South Park character has ever done. And I'm going alphabetically, so let's start with Bebe Stevens. So, Bebe is the mastermind behind the list, i.e. a ranking system where she rates the boys from being the cutest to being the fuggliest.
No way! Yes way, check it out!
But it turns out that she rigged it just so she could date Clive and score some free shoes, basically completely undermining the sacred list for her own gain.
Not Bebe. She's dating Clyde now. Nobody loves shoes more than her.
Stan and Wendy eventually found out about this and threatened to expose her, so Bebe held them at gunpoint on the school roof.
You've compromised everything! Our list's integrity!
Did you see these shoes, Wendy? They're incredible!
And in their struggle over the gun, poor innocent Kenny ended up dead and Bebe was arrested.
Wait, I didn't do anything wrong!
You can explain all that downtown.
Butters. Butters may be cute and naive, but his many accidents have caused a ton of disasters. But before I give my pick for the worst thing he's ever done, I reached out to YouTuber Tendo to give his opinion. And in case you're not aware of him, Tendo is making great South Park content for at least a year now, and I found him through his video, One Fact About Every South Park Episode Ever. So what would you say is the worst thing that Butters ever did, Tendo?
In the episode You Got F'd in the A, Butters does one of the most horrific things I think I've seen in the whole series. And knowing Butters, of course it was unintentional. Butters was a Colorado State champion in tap dancing. During one of his performances of the hit song, I've Got Something in My Pocket for You, Butters was putting on a real show for the audience. That is until his shoe slips off and collides with a stage light, forcing it to come crashing down. As just like a scene out of Final Destination, it starts a chain reaction of unavoidable accidents, with Butters stood in a state of shock, not being able to comprehend what just happened, as he is looking on at 23 casualties. 23 casualties is pretty bad, but at least no one else got hurt. Oh wait, I forgot at the end of the episode, he kills 5 more by accident.
No! Jesus, not again!
Yeah, maybe just stick to Hello Kitty Island Adventure from now on, pal?
Thank you so much, Tendo. Be sure to subscribe to him after this, as well as the other awesome South Park creators that we've got coming up. Now, while Butters' tap dancing fiasco was definitely a big disaster, I'd personally argue that the worst thing he did was hold a group of innocent people hostage in the China problem. And what's worse is that he shot a bunch of dudes in the D.
God damn it, Butters, what did I say about shooting guys in the... Aw, I did it again? What the hell is wrong with you?
Carol McCormick. Now, I was originally going to combine Kenny's parents, but then decided to give Stuart his very own section because, well, there was too much to unpack there. But that's not to say that Carol also isn't a very negligent parent. And if I'm going to specify, I'm going to say that it was her attending the Cthulhu cult just so she could get free beer. It is because of this that Kenny is cursed with immortality. Now, personally, I think immortality sounds like the ultimate superpower, and I'd personally love that. But seeing as Kenny himself has called it a curse and absolutely hates it,
do you know what it feels like to be stabbed? To be shot? Decapitated? Torn apart?
I'm going to say that is the worst thing his mum has ever done.
We should have never gone to that stupid cult meeting.
Chef. I always loved Chef, so it absolutely killed me when all of that controversy went down between Isaac Hayes and the South Park creators behind the scenes, but I'm not going to dive into all that drama here because honestly, it's a topic for a whole other video. But basically what you need to know is that Hayes left the show, and in season 10 they then brought Chef back using old audio clips.
Chef, I can't believe you're back!
Well, it's true.
But are you back for good?
That's right.
And when he returned, we found out that he was brainwashed by the Super Adventure Club, basically a bunch of old guys doing some really messed up stuff with kids.
Come on, children. You're my sexual fantasy. Let's all make sweet love.
Side note, I have to be really careful with my words here because YouTube is super strict. Like recently, they age restricted my Family Guy review video because I spoke about Herbert the P word. All those views I got from that were tanked into oblivion, so that's why I'm being very careful here. Anyway, while the show has never flat out said that Chef was being inappropriate with the kids, it's pretty heavily hinted at, and honestly, if that's the case, I hate this episode.
I'm gonna make love to the children.
It's sick to take one of the few solid father figures that the boys have ever had and turn him into the worst thing imaginable. But if I'm wrong and he didn't cross that line, then the worst thing that Chef probably did was set a Buddhist monk on fire in season 4 Chef Goes Nanas. Clyde Donovan. Now for this guy, I've got to go with the time that he left the toilet seat up, and as a result, his mother got stuck in the bowl and her insides were entirely sucked out.
We should have been harder on you all those times you left the toilet seat up.
Let that be a lesson to you boys. Remember to keep that darn toilet seat down, otherwise the ladies in your life may end up dead. Now let's move on to Craig. Craig has a real issue of sticking his middle finger up at everyone, including his teachers and Mr. Mackey.
Well, I tell you what, young man, you're gonna be held back a grade if you don't Did you just flip me off?
But to be fair, it is his parents who taught him this bad behaviour. Now's perhaps a good time to mention that I'm only covering the main South Park characters, i.e. the ones who've had a solid amount of screen time, so don't come at me for leaving out Chef's parents or, I don't know, Roy. I'm also not going to be including celebrities here. Alright, so now that's out of the way, let's keep it rolling. Doctor. Someone needs to revoke this man's license stat. He's killed more people than he's probably saved. Because in one episode he tried to inject a man with a syringe and scrape the needle across his bones, which, just makes me shiver, and then his head popped off.
Oh, his head fell off.
And to highlight the seriousness of a crime where a doctor is convicted of gross negligence manslaughter while treating a patient, he could be sentenced to a lifetime in prison.
Get me 50 cc's of ketamine, stat! And get something for the kid, too.
Dr. Mephesto. South Park's resident mad scientist is best known for his wild genetic experiments.
And here, of course, is my 4-assed ostrich and my 4-assed mongoose.
And sure, his cruel animal experiments where he gives them multiple butts are pretty horrific, but for a more specific example, let's go with the time that he created a clone of Stan.
Oh my god, he only has 1 ass. He's of no use to me, I'll have to burn the room.
Now, this clone escaped, went on a rampage through town, destroyed businesses, and hurt a ton of people. Mephesto's experiments are totally unethical and completely dangerous. He was so caught up in whether he could, he didn't stop to think if he actually should. Eric Cartman. My god, where do I even start with this guy? I personally think that the worst thing he ever did was eat all of the crispy skin off everyone's KFC. Everyone knows that's the best bit.
Cartman, you ate the skin off of every piece of chicken! Well, I saved you all the chicken part.
I'm kidding, of course. Well, kinda. No, my first thought immediately went to the time where he plotted to have Scott Tenorman's parents shot. He then got their bodies, chopped them up and turned them into a chili before then feeding them back to Scott. And after revealing this, Cartman began tasting his delicious tears.
Oh, the tears of unfathomable sadness. Yummy, you guys.
To make things even worse, Eric later found out that the man he killed was his very own father.
You killed your own father, and then you fed him to your half-brother!
And yes, even though that is insanely dark, I'm not sure that is the absolute worst thing he's ever done. Because if we're talking about pure body kill count, then it has to be the time where he teamed up with Cthulhu and had him wipe out millions. Father Maxi. As the local Roman Catholic priest, you'd think that Father Maxi would be the town's moral compass. But no, in Season 3's Korn's Groovy Pirate Ghost Mystery, Maxi is furious about everyone celebrating Halloween, which he sees as an abomination to God. So, what does he do? Well, he somehow created pirate ghosts that terrorized the town. They even turned out to be killer pirate ghosts, blasting cannons into crowds and killing dozens. And when Maxi was eventually caught and questioned, he couldn't give a single F.
Don't you see that by trying to stop Halloween, you've scared the hell out of everybody? No.
He would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for those meddling kids and those mangy corn boys. Gerald. When I reached out to my friend Kitty Monk and asked her to pick any South Park character in the world to talk about, she chose Kyle's dad. So I'll let her take it from here.
Ooh, thanks for bringing me on, Lid. I have a bone to pick with him. Now, with Gerald, I had plenty of moments to choose from, but the worst of all, to me, will always be him driving Freyja Olengard, a Danish Olympian, Dig-a-mid unalive. YouTube rules. As infamous internet trolls, Gerald bullies women on the internet, but with Frasier Olengard, it's personal, and she has made a point not to feed into him, thinking he'll learn from his mistake and just go away. Instead, Gerald takes this as an opportunity to make the cyberbullying 10 trillion times worse, like insulting her on national TV over the fact she's a breast cancer survivor. With Heidi, the trolling was bad enough and made her quit Twitter, but with Frasier, it made her quit life. She unalives herself in a gruesome public fashion on national TV. So yeah, this is the worst thing Gerald has done in the show. Overall, it's evil. And Lydia told me I get one curse. I wanted to count, so Gerald, you're an insensitive dick. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Kitty. And yeah, I've got nothing else to add. That was seriously effed up. The Goth Kids. I've got to get really vulnerable here, and I'm gonna say something really embarrassing. I was a lot like these Goth Kids when I was younger. I used to get so annoyed when people called me an emo.
I'm not emo. Don't you even know the death?
Christ, I know. Anyway, so these four legends usually keep themselves to themselves, but in season 12, we had the episode The Ungroundable, where they get so fed up with everyone confusing them for vampires.
But they can't dress like that. That's our style.
So, what did they do? Well, they headed to the mall and set fire to the Hot Topic store to put an end to the vampire trend. Arson is a very serious crime that can result in accidental casualties and a prison sentence. But hey, at least they got rid of those conformist poser vampires. Heidi. This poor girl was once sweet and innocent, but that's until Eric came into her life. He was an emotionally manipulative boyfriend who threatened to off himself constantly whenever she tried to break up with him.
Called me a whore and pushed me in front of a car.
Heidi, I was in a bad mood!
Cartman gaslit her so much that his toxic behavior eventually rubbed off on her, turning her into a female version of him. She started acting just like him and soon treated her own friends like total crap.
Teresa, don't get all aggro on me because you're pissed off your family lives in a trailer.
It is hard to blame her though, because Eric chipped away at her bit by bit, molding her into his own evil image.
Bullcrap, y'all talking about me again. Cause you're judgmental bitches.
Ike. Even though Carl's little brother sounds so super cute, he's actually a criminal mastermind in season 12's About Last Night. It's revealed that he's part of the Presidential Crime Syndicate, a secret team with Obama, McCain, and Sarah Palin. Together they hatch a plan to steal the valuable Hope Diamond, and for his part, Ike had to pretend that he wanted to unalive himself.
Bye. No!
He did this because he needed to be at the hospital at the exact right time, and it's here where he remotely detonated a bomb to blow up a plane with the dummy versions of the politicians inside of it. He even altered medical records to fake their deaths. So basically, Ike lied and put his family through absolute hell. Jesus. In Matthew 5:38, Jesus Christ said, "If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also." Basically, do not take an eye for an eye. But the Jesus in South Park is like, nah, F that pacifist shit, where are my guns? Because in the season 6 episode of Red Sleigh Down, Jesus went all Rambo when he brutally gunned down dozens of men while rescuing Santa in Iraq.
This is such a magical Christmas adventure, you guys.
And sure, he was saving jolly old Saint Nick, but Jesus, you seem to enjoy the whole thing a bit too much. Jimbo Kern. In season 2's Cartman's mom is still a dirty ass, Jimbo and a group of adults get trapped inside of a building during a snowstorm, and almost immediately, Jimbo suggests that they resort to cannibalism.
Our only option might be to eat each other to stay alive. It's only been like 4 hours.
And his first pick for a meal, actor Eric Roberts. So they kill, cook, and eat him. And before they've even finished picking his bones clean, Jimbo quickly suggests that they eat someone else. And by the time they've managed to dig themselves out, they've eaten an entire television crew. And yeah, sure, Jimbo wasn't the only one involved, but he is the one that came up with the whole cannibalism idea. And without him, Eric Roberts and the others might still be alive, and poor Emma Roberts would have had a father. Jimmy. Jimmy's dream is to be a stand-up comedian, but there was nothing funny about him taking steroids to compete in the Paralympic Games. These steroids led him into having violent mood swings to the point where he beat up his girlfriend with his crutches, and when his mum stepped in, he hit her too. By the way, if you've made it this far, I just want to say, wow, what a terrific audience. Kenny, or Kenny. With Kenny, I'm usually talking about the worst things that have happened to him, not the other way around. But while he is South Park's punching bag, Kenny has done his fair share of questionable things. Like, remember when he threw a ninja star in Butts' eye? It's a scene that is so gross that YouTube won't even let me show it. But to be fair, that wasn't malicious, it was just an accident. But something that definitely wasn't was him attempting to give his mother an abortion with a plunger.
Kenny, what the hell are you doing?
Kyle. Immediately, I thought about that time where Carl killed Jesus Christ, which is again another scene that YouTube won't let me show. But to be fair, Jesus literally asked Carl to do it. He didn't want to. So in that case, let's go with the time where he convinced President Garrison to nuke Canada. And while I'm not sure that every Canadian died, Carl was still very complicit in the deaths of millions. Liane Cartman. Eric is the way he is largely because of his mother. She encourages his bad behaviour by spoiling him and rarely disciplining him. Also, his bigoted views have to come from somewhere, right? And it is clear that she played a role in putting these thoughts in his head. After all, she was the one who made the Shitler costume for Halloween.
My mom made it. Isn't it cool? No, it's not cool!
There was one moment though where she tried to discipline him with the help of Caesar the dog trainer.
Mom, this is degrading! Ah, God damn it!
But as soon as he turned down her advances and left, she went right back to enabling Eric's awful behaviour.
Yes, darling. You can have whatever you want.
So you could say that every awful thing that Eric has done, Liane is partly to blame too. And speaking of bad mothers, let's now talk about Butts' mum, Linda Stotch. When Linda found out about her husband sneaking around to gay bathhouses, she snapped. And so one night she took little naive Butters in her car to the river and let it roll into the water. And to cover up her attempted murder, she blamed it on some Puerto Rican guy.
Puerto Rican.
Was he tall? Short?
He was average Puerto Rican height.
So yeah, attempting to kill your child is the absolute worst thing a parent could ever do. Mayor McDaniels. This character is the stereotypical mayor that you may see in so many movies that prioritize their own interests over the well-being of the townsfolk, much like the mayor from Jaws, for example. And there's no bigger evidence of this than in season 9's Die Hippie Die. Here McDaniels allowed the town to host a music festival which attracted hordes and hordes of hippies. And McDaniels soon came to regret her decision and blew her brains out.
What have I done?
Yeah, South Park is now hippie capital of the world!
But this gunshot to the head somehow wasn't fatal, and she soon appeared by the end of the episode with a bandage on her head. And it was only really thanks to Eric and his team that the hippie invasion was eventually stopped. So it was her poor decisions that led to disastrous consequences for South Park, like having some really smelly hippies running about.
Does the city council know about this?
They don't have to know. I can sign whatever permit I want.
You just sold out our town! Ah!
Marvin Marsh. In the earlier seasons, a recurring gag with Marvin was that he really wanted to die. And in the 6th episode, he asked his 10-year-old grandson to kill him.
I'm not gonna kill you, Grandpa.
Why not?
'Cause I'll get in trouble.
It's here where we also found out that he killed his own grandpa too at Stan's age. And when Stan refused to go through with it, Marvin tried to provoke Cartman into doing it instead.
I'll kill you!
That's the spirit, Tubby!
Come on, Cartman, he's just trying to get to you.
So yeah, asking your grandson and his friends to kill you, therefore traumatizing them for life and landing them in serious trouble, is pretty awful. Mr. Garrison. This is another case of, where do I even start? I already used blowing up Canada for Kyle's bad thing, so let's pick something else, which I guess is doable because honestly, I'm spoiled for choice here. So, should I go with the time that he R-worded the President of Canada to death, or maybe the time that he prevented a COVID vaccine from being made because he wanted millions of Mexicans to die? It is very hard to top that level of evil, but I'm gonna have to go with the less obvious one, which is in Season 4's Cartman Joins Nambler. This is where Garrison is revealed to be a P-word and try to solicit Cartman. There's nothing worse than that kind of predator. Now, just like my Family Guy video, when I say this is the worst thing a character has ever done, I'm definitely not downplaying all of the awful things that they've also done. At the end of the day, none of this happened, so please just remember this is an absurd animated comedy, and this is just a silly little YouTube video. Let's not take things too seriously, eh? Mr. Hankey. This magical talking poo spreads joy and cheer for everyone in South Park every year. At least he did before he was cancelled and sent packing. And what led him into being kicked out? Well, he started tweeting extremely offensive things. But hey, at least Springfield welcomed him with open arms.
Welcome, my friend. Please, rest your weary feet and make yourself at home here.
Mr. Mackey. As the school's counsellor, his job is to help the kids, not, literally throw them under the bus. But in Bastamouth, that's exactly what he does. To cut a long story short, the teachers were worried that their idea of poisoning the kids would end up on the gossip site Eavesdropper.
What's a bigger story than all the students being made sick?
So Mackey comes up with the genius idea of throwing Cartman under the bus to save themselves. And the kicker is that literally no one cared that Cartman got ran over, so it was all for nothing anyway. Mr. Slave. Mr. Slave's worst moment definitely has to be when he took things way too far with Paris Hilton. In the episode, Paris shows up in South Park and turns all of the girls into mini versions of herself. And Mr. Slave was fed up with her bad influence.
She may have money, but she's a thoughtless, talentless lowlife.
So in one of the most disgusting moments in the entire show, he literally shoved Paris all the way up inside himself. Absolutely gross. I always felt so bad for Paris Hilton here, because yeah, sure, she may have been a bad influence on little girls, but she certainly didn't deserve that shitty punishment. And yet, crappy pun totally intended. Ms. Crabtree. Before this lady was unceremoniously murdered in the episode Cartman's Incredible Gift, she used to be the school bus driver. And to get the kids to calm down, she would threaten to shoot an innocent little bunny to shut them up.
Dude, she always tries to quiet us down by threatening to kill that bunny, but I wonder if she ever would. Oh, she would, dude. She would.
But to be fair, driving these little brats around every single day would drive anyone nuts. Nathan and Mimsy. Nathan and his sidekick Mimsy are always cooking up ridiculous schemes to take down their rivals Timmy and Jimmy. But no matter how elaborate their plans may be, they always blow up in Nathan's face, thanks to Mimsy's screw-ups.
Shut up, Mimsy! Oh, sorry, boss.
But his most villainous move came in the season 19 episode where he teamed up with Leslie, a rogue ad, to take over South Park through gentrification. And when Jimmy got too close to uncovering the truth, Nathan took him hostage.
All I had to do was work for the ads, and I got everything I wanted.
But the whole thing unraveled when Nathan slapped his girlfriend Classy. Big mistake. Huge. She beat the crap out of him, saved Jimmy, and their escape foiled Nathan's plan, causing the Whole Foods to literally take off and leave town. Nurse Gollum. Nurse Gollum is best known for having a conjoined fetus attached to her head, but in her very first appearance way back in the unaired South Park pilot, she didn't have this deformity, and there was also something else missing, her usually kind demeanour. In the pilot, she was shockingly mean to Pip, treating him like absolute garbage for no real reason.
Oh dear, I do hope he'll be okay.
Shut up, Pip! Officer Barbrady. So while this cop isn't half as bad as Sergeant Harrison Yates, who I'll get onto soon, he is still a pretty big screw-up. Case in point, in the very first episode, he runs over Kenny with his police car and doesn't even care that he just killed a little boy. PC Principal. PC Principal is all about political correctness, but his methods are anything but kind. He'll beat the absolute crap out of you if you say anything offensive. Take that time when the school newspaper used the R word and he outright threatened to break the legs of whoever was responsible. But when he found out that Jimmy was the editor, he suddenly got tongue-tied.
You gonna break his legs, PC Principal?
But ultimately, this guy is a violent bully who dishes out punishment whenever he feels like it. Like he once beat the crap out of Cartman for saying spokesman instead of spokesperson.
Are you purposely trying to use words that assert your male privilege?
And as a result, Cartman ended up in hospital. Corporal punishment is illegal in schools, and PC Principal should have been charged with child abuse and aggravated assault. Pip. Poor Pip. Everyone hates you because you're French.
God, French people piss me off.
And one of Pip's biggest haters has to be Blooms, so I'll let him take it from here.
Wow, I really thought better of you, Lydia. You asked me to be in a video about South Park, and I say yes out of the kindness of my heart, and you tell me I have to talk about Pip. Alright, well, you wanted me to talk about the worst thing Pip's ever done, so here you go. He exists. He's in the show. That's the worst thing he's ever done.
Oh, what jolly good fun.
Nah, I'm just kidding. She actually let me pick who I wanted to talk about, and I picked Pip, so don't blame her for that. But it actually is kind of difficult to find the worst thing Pip has done because he's never really done anything that bad at all, honestly. For the most part, he kind of just deals with bad things being done to him and kind of rolls with the punches. But if I had to pick the worst thing that he did, it's probably when he broke Kyle's nose with a dodgeball after Kyle was antagonizing him and calling him French. But even in that situation, I think his actions were justified because Kyle was clearly trying to get a rise out of him. So yeah, Pip's really never done anything bad, so it's kind of hard to say what the worst thing he did is. So instead, I'll answer the question of what is the best thing he did, and that's a much easier question to answer. The best thing that Pip has done in the entirety of South Park came in episode 201 when he died at the hand of Mecha Streisand.
Principal Victoria. The former principal of South Park Elementary once confessed to killing a man.
I hit him over the head and I cut up the body. I tried to burn it, but it wouldn't burn.
Randy Marsh. Oh man, the awful things this guy has done could probably fill an entire hour-long video. How the hell am I supposed to pick just one?
I thought this was America. Huh? Isn't this America?
Maybe it's the time where he dragged his entire family to a weed farm to become a farmer, even though they were absolutely miserable. How about the time where he caused Earth to be shut off from the rest of the galaxy due to his greed?
Well, that sucks.
But honestly, the worst thing he did, well, it has to be when he became patient zero for COVID. In the pandemic special, we find out that Randy banged a pangolin, which then sparked the pandemic. So, we have Randy to thank for keeping us locked up for days, months, years, and yeah, a lifetime. Thanks, Randy. Richard and Mrs Tweek. The reason Tweek is so darn twitchy is because his parents keep giving him coffee 24/7.
This is it, man. It's over.
Tweek, calm down. Have some coffee.
And not only should they not be giving a kid with so much anxiety caffeine, it's revealed in the Stick of Truth video game that they lace his coffee with meth. This is a very serious crime that falls under child abuse and could lead to a loss of parental rights. Also, thousands of dollars in fines, in addition to 8 to 32 years in prison in the state of Colorado. Santa Claus. The worst thing this guy ever did was not get me the Mr. Frosty Icy Crunch Maker that I asked for consistently from the ages of 4 to 8. Seriously, where the hell is my damn Mr. Frosty machine, Santa? But if we're going to talk about South Park, then it has to be the time in Season 6's Red Sleigh Down when Santa gets captured by Iraqi terrorists and Jesus swoops in to save them, and Santa then goes on a straight up killing spree. And sure, he was totally justified, but jolly old Saint Nick gunning down a dozen of people is a very uncomfortable sight.
I just couldn't let him live. He shocked Santa's balls.
Satan. The worst thing that Satan did was in South Park Bigger, Longer and Uncut, when he planned to let hell rise up and take over Earth. Why? Because he was in a toxic relationship with Saddam Hussein, who manipulated him into unleashing chaos. Thankfully, he eventually stood up to Saddam and dumped him, but not before nearly wiping out all of humanity. Scott Malkinson. If you were to ask someone like Eric Carmen about the worst thing about Scott, then he'd probably say his diabetes.
I'm Scott Malkinson. I've got a lisp and I've got diabetes.
But in my opinion, the worst thing that Scott ever did was show his winky to everyone when he joined Butts' Wieners Out movement. And yeah, he wasn't the only one, but otherwise, he's got a pretty clean record. Sergeant Harrison Yates. Now, for starters, I can tell you the worst thing his wife has ever done, and that's overwriting his save game in Red Dead Redemption. And everyone knows that overwriting someone's save game is absolutely unforgivable. But then again, Harrison totally deserves it. This guy is the most corrupt and racist cop ever. In fact, it's revealed in Season 19's Naughty Ninjas that he only joined the force to beat up minorities.
See, it used to be we could beat up minorities and nobody cared. It's the reason a lot of us joined the force.
And in the episode The Jeffersons, he even admits that he and his fellow officers have been framing rich African Americans for crimes that they didn't commit. He almost went as far as planting false evidence to arrest Michael Jackson, only backing off when he thought that Michael Jackson was in fact white.
I'm never gonna frame an innocent man again, unless I know he's black for sure!
Sharon Marsh. It's safe to say that Sharon might be the best mum in South Park, but that's not saying much given her competition. Even still, she'd do anything to protect her son, even covering up his crimes. Like in the season 2 episode Spooky Fish, where Sharon thought Stan was a murderer who couldn't stop killing people, when in reality, it was his fish.
Now don't worry, Stanley. Mommy's going to hide the body. Nobody's going to take my baby away.
So, what did she do? She buried all the bodies in the backyard, and when Officer Barbrady caught wind of it, she tied him up in the basement.
Okay, Miss Marsh, I'm afraid I'm gonna have to ask you a few questions.
And sure, she did it all for her son, but she still committed a serious crime. Being an accessory after the fact to murder can lead you up to 15 years in prison. But again, she's still the mother of the year in South Park. Sheila. Look, I never want to call women the B word, but in this case, I'm gonna have to make an exception. Carl's mum is the biggest bitch in the whole world. I mean, she actually started a war against Canada over her ridiculous anti-swearing crusade. This war unleashed chaos and literal hell on Earth, and who knows how many people were killed because of Sheila's actions. Shelley Marsh. At first, I thought about including the time that she messed with her family's Halloween weed special, but he totally deserved it. So let's go with the obvious one, in that she beats up her little brother. Now, let's move on to her little brother, who is Stan Marsh. Come on, this one's obvious, right? It's the time he took his friend ziplining so he could get an iPod Nano. Nah, in all seriousness, the worst thing that Stan ever did was lose the big hockey game, which led to this cute little boy dying of cancer. Alright, jokes aside. I would say the worst thing that Stan has ever done is in a post-COVID special when he set his dad's farm on fire, not realizing that his sister was still inside. It was a decision that led to devastating consequences, as his mother unalived herself because of it. And while this event did get retconned later on, it was still a massive low point for Stan. Stephen Stotch. Stephen is a manipulative and abusive dad, always yelling at his boy and grounding him for no good reason.
Butters, you are grounded!
Dang it!
So I was torn over this one. Is the worst thing Stephen did was sell Butters to Paris Hilton for $250 million?
Cash up front.
Oh, hamburgers!
Or grounding him for 16 years and then completely abandoning him in the special? Both are very, very awful, but the absolute worst thing was him sending Butters to gay conversion camp after catching Cartman trying to stick his little winky inside of his mouth. And what makes it worse, Stephen is bisexual himself.
I like being bi-curious.
Well, you know something? So do I.
Stuart McCormick. This guy could definitely give Stephen a run for his money for the worst dad in South Park. This scumbag ran a meth lab in his garden, which got him arrested, and his kids were taken into foster care. Terrance and Phillip. In season 2's Terrance and Phillip in Not Without My Anus, Terrance goes on trial for bludgeoning a doctor with a hammer, and what's his defense? Somehow this genius move works, and he's found not guilty. So if you ever find yourself in court for a serious crime, apparently farting is a legit strategy. Timmy. In season 7, Timmy and Jimmy get caught up in a gang war and accidentally iced a rival crew. But honestly, they had no idea what was going on, so can we really count that? So let's talk about something that Timmy did do on purpose. In season 5's Cripple Fight, Timmy was seriously jealous of the new kid Jimmy, who quickly became popular thanks to his comedy routine.
Jimmy's funny, dude. Yeah, well, he's the coolest kid with disabilities in the world.
This jealousy built up with the two ending up in a brawl. They eventually made peace and seemed like they were well on their way to being friends. But Two-Faced Jimmy photoshopped Jimmy's head onto two guys embracing, getting him kicked out of the Scouts.
No! Timmy!
The fact that Jimmy tried to make peace with him but Timmy straight up backstabbed him was a total douche move. Still, they ended up best friends anyway, so I guess it all worked out in the end. Tolkien Black. Tolkien doesn't usually get in as much trouble as the other kids, but he's definitely gone along with some shady stuff in the past. Like in a season 4 episode where he and the other kids falsely accused their parents of inappropriate behaviour. And why was that? So the adults would get arrested, leaving the kids with no one to boss them around. So our Tolkien definitely wasn't alone in doing this. It's far from his proudest moment. Towelie. This Tao is just the worst.
You're the worst character ever, Towelie.
I know. Towelie struggles with addiction, and while I can feel sorry for him to a certain point, he just keeps making the same dumb decisions over and over.
He's broken into my house twice and stolen my allowance. I've got almost nothing left.
But the worst thing this Tao ever did was in season 14's Crippled Summer. Towelie hits a new low with his addiction and completely neglects his son Washcloth. And instead of stepping up as a parent, he's too busy getting high and making piss poor decisions.
You can all suck it! You're all a bunch of cows, that's what you are!
Tuong Lu Kim. When Tuong Lu Kim's not running Citywalk, he's busy defending his wall from those goddamn Mongolians.
Stop breaking down my city wall, you stupid Mongolians!
But it's not just the Mongolians he's got city beef with. He also can't stand the Japanese. When a sushi restaurant opened up, Lu Kim couldn't handle the competition and planned to kill the owner. So Lu Kim invited him to the top of a tower where he intended to frame the murder as him unaliving himself, and although the guy did technically jump himself, Lu Kim still planned to murder that man. And here's the wild twist, he's not even Chinese. Tuong Lu Kim is actually Dr. Janus, an American psychiatrist with a split personality. Tweek. Tweek's got it rough, okay. His parents get him jacked up on caffeine and drugs, and then President Garrison dragged him into the whole North Korea drama. This poor kid's usually just caught up in amongst the chaos, rather than actually causing it. But if we have to plan something on him, let's go with season 19's Tweek and Craig. When the whole town pressures them to be together, they plan a staged breakup. And it was all set, but Tweek goes all off script, painting Craig as this manipulative cheater while playing the victim.
You're going too far, dude. This is, like, totally not necessary. I'm going too far? What is wrong with you?
Not only did this tank Craig's popularity, but it also caused the entire town to be depressed. Ultimately, things did work out eventually, and they're still a couple to this day. And finally, we come to Wendy Testerberger. Although Wendy seems like the most level-headed kid at South Park Elementary, it's easy to forget that she can be a little psycho. In fact, she killed someone before even Eric. You don't want to mess with her, just ask her substitute teacher in the 11th episode Tom's Rhinoplasty.
You heard me! Stay away from my man, bitch, or I'll whoop your sorry hoe ass back to last year!
Wendy got a group of Iraqi soldiers to arrest Miss Ellen on false charges, and the poor teacher was sent on a one-way rocket to the sun.
Bye-bye, Miss Ellen.
So yeah, you don't want to cross Wendy. And that's probably a very good time to end the video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.